Hi, everyone, and welcome back to Unlocking Venture Capital. I'm here with Matan, the managing director of Verstra Ventures. Hi, how are you doing?
Hey, Sydney, good to see you.
Good to see you too. How is your holidays going?
Yeah, they're going pretty well. Everyone seems to take time off, so I get less emails. It's nice.
It's a good break for you for once, huh?
Yeah,
That is great. I would love to learn more about you and about the journey that you went through to get to where you are. I'm sure everyone is really curious to know. I know that you have told me before, but I would love for you to share a little bit about your personal journey to get to where you are today in your career in venture capital.
yeah, thanks for asking. I guess I'm a lifelong entrepreneur, come from a family of entrepreneurs. Basically, everyone in my family, including my father, my brother, my uncles, they're all, have their own small businesses. With some very rare exceptions in my family. So I just grew up always seeing people doing their own thing, never really having typical career paths. To the extent that I would ever have a career, it would be in supporting other entrepreneurs. Started my first business with a couple of friends when I was 18, 19. My only real job was in venture capital. Before that, I was working for family businesses. My first real job at university was in venture capital. I was very lucky to be able to get into it. I did that for a few years, quit to start a business again, and went back into venture capital.
In entrepreneurship, which has really built you into the character that you are, it takes a lot of drive. So, how would you say, in terms of things that really drive you, has that level of drive changed over the years?
Yeah, so level of drive is interesting because it's hard to compare myself to other people. I don't know what motivates and animates other people. Experientially, I just know what motivations I have. So for me, it's sometimes hard to understand certain people that lack ambition to do something great in their life. And everyone will have a different definition for that. So I'm not even discussing what is a worthwhile goal or ambition to have, more so that somebody should have a goal that constantly pushes oneself to be a little bit uncomfortable. When you're a little bit uncomfortable, you're taking the next step towards learning and growing. No matter what I do, I try to always be in a place where I'm a little bit uncomfortable, which forces me to grow. I don't know where that comes from. I guess it comes from my parents, my upbringing, my environment, maybe something inherent as well. Because of that, and channeling that ambition into supporting entrepreneurs and innovation, that puts me on the path that I'm on today.
That is so great. I know that you do show a lot of great support to entrepreneurs, especially here in the Canadian ecosystem, which is fantastic. I know that you hold office hours. It's something that you also publish on your LinkedIn, and you offer this as a great gift to startups to give them advice and some guidance. So, how do you really manage all of that and provide ongoing support to new founders, especially founders who you've never met and you don't know yet?
It's a great question. I mean, you ask a lot of great questions because I've spoken to you many times before, and you're always very insightful. I'll tell you kind of the trick when it comes to the office hours. Most people don't utilize it. A lot of people approach me and ask for advice. Most of the time, it's people looking to raise money. They're not really asking for advice. So I put that there and I say, listen, if you want advice, and it's really one of the reasons I post on LinkedIn a lot. Started doing that about a year and a half ago. And the reason was I'm getting asked a lot of the same questions all the time. And rather than just answering those questions over and over again, let me just post about it. And of course, they're my experiences. And whenever I'm frustrated about something, it compels me to say something. Most of the things I write don't get published because a lot of them are not so internet friendly, or they are internet friendly, which is part of the problem. So when people reach out to me asking for advice, I say, first read my LinkedIn stuff. If you still feel that your questions are not addressed and you're not looking to raise money, if you're looking to raise money, there's a whole other process for that. But if they're not addressed on LinkedIn or my burgeoning YouTube, in terms of how to manage the people that do utilize that, it's very simple. I just use like a Calendly thing and I give a certain amount of time every day to it. And it's just part of being part of the ecosystem. I think every VC should do something like that, and most do. Most are pretty generous with their time.
And just as a personal follow up, how many of those entrepreneurs are first time entrepreneurs? This is their first idea, this is their first product, first venture, versus they have a little bit more experience and they actually come with you with a very specific case scenario or obstacle at hand?
They're mostly people that are first time entrepreneurs, people that have a little bit more experience, understand how to approach institutional or professional investors. They understand it's more of a relationship game, and very quickly they'll realize who are in their universe of potential investors and people that they should take advice from. I'm not the right person to take advice from for most people. I'm very focused on a particular subset of innovation or startups in the specific stage and specific geographies. More experienced people are not going to waste their time speaking with me unless I'm the right person for them to take advice from or to raise money from. The people that tend to reach out that haven't done that work are less experienced. They believe that they can sell anyone on their product, and it doesn't matter what your criteria or your investment mandate is, they'll convince you to invest in their business. And it's just a mistake.
And mistakes are things that really shape us into giving us a lot more experience no matter what career path that you're trying to take. So in terms of mistakes, what kind of mistakes that are more prominent in your mind do you think has shaped you to be a better entrepreneur over time?
I think I reflect on
Me too.
at nighttime when I'm secluded. There's too many, actually. One of the early mistakes I made when I tried to be a successful entrepreneur is mixing friendship with business partnerships.
Okay.
Sometimes it can work out very, very well. And I have a case in my life. I have two cases: a case in my life where it worked out, the first case, and a case in my life where it hasn't worked out, a later case. It's really important that because you're good friends with people doesn't make them good business partners. That's a very important thing for people to understand, because generally speaking, the people that become your partners in business are people you already know. Those people are generally your friends. You have to be very careful. I'm still friends with everybody I started a business with, but it doesn't necessarily make for a good partnership. The other thing is that experience is very important. I hate saying obvious things, but sometimes it's important for people to hear. The most successful entrepreneurs I've come across have a lot of life experience and domain experience. They know their business, their industry, their market in and out. And of course, you can be successful without that, but your odds are much less. I was arrogant enough to try to start a business at one point in an area I knew very little about. You can be successful. It's just going to be much harder. You're better off learning about that industry from the inside before trying to innovate or disrupt.
That's some good advice, and probably advice that comes often during your office hours. I know that you have had accomplished a lot in your career, so I was wondering, what kind of new skill do you think that you would like to learn? It is near the end of the year, so maybe you've reflected on this.
Yeah, it's a bit of a struggle because there's things I need to learn.
Okay.
They're very challenging for someone in my position where you don't have enough time in the day to do everything you're supposed to do. So I've been trying to learn coding, Python, things like that. So I have a better understanding for AI, because I think that
Okay.
that's a fundamental disruption cycle. It would be learning like how to do website development in the early 2000s. Like if you knew how to do that and you understood how the internet worked, you could have been very successful. That was the platform that spurred a whole host of innovations. I think AI, that's the next platform of innovation. Having a much better understanding of that is critical and important as an investor and as an entrepreneur. I'm trying to learn a little bit about the fundamentals of generative AI and AI more broadly, deep learning, just understanding the basic concepts of it, and then drilling down, maybe a little bit to the math of it and the philosophy of it, and then even to try to understand the coding a little bit as well, just so I'm a little bit more dangerous when I'm speaking to entrepreneurs.
Good. I love that. And I hope that you continue doing it and you get all of the skill set and the accomplishments that you're looking for. I know that just from knowing you for a number of years, you have a lot of great customs, practices, and rituals. Are there any of those particular kinds of rituals or daily routines that kind of keep you grounded and keep you balanced?
Oh my goodness. So I practice Judaism pretty religiously, as they say. And there's a couple. One is actually right beside me, and called tefillin, right?
Okay.
You put on with scrolls of the Torah on
Okay.
the head and on the arm. And it's part of you put on part of the morning prayer. So try to go to prayer every morning. It's obviously a very personal practice. You can do it on your own, but the best way to do it is with a community of at least 10 men. So try to go every morning to do that. Kind of sets the day up very well, because every morning you have to get up at a certain time. You have to orient your mind and your direction towards accomplishing something positive. Things get hard in life. It's very chaotic. You're always faced with very tough decisions,
Yeah.
and orienting yourself from the very beginning of the day towards understanding the purpose of why you're doing what you're doing to begin with, then starting your day is very, very important. Obviously, also the Sabbath is quite important. So every week you kind of take a step back to reflect on the week and prepare yourself for the following week. That's quite important as well.
That is great. And I love that you share that. And I love that it keeps you balanced on an ongoing basis. I know that you have been very vocal about the current state of affairs, things that have been happening in Israel. And I know that it's important to you to voice your opinions on certain platforms, and you're met with so I was just wondering, and before you posted these things about the current state of affairs, what was going on through your mind as a person that people look up to, as a person that is high up in your industry, and the decisions around going to things like Web Summit? What were the thoughts that were going on, being like, should I, shouldn't I?
Yeah, thanks for asking, because I don't think anyone's asked me that before. I posted on other controversial things in the past. I'll start off by saying that on LinkedIn, people, whenever they talk about politics, they tend to preface, like, I don't usually talk about politics on LinkedIn, but I feel compelled, like, all that stuff. I don't really buy into that so much. Your politics or what you think about the world, that's a fundamental thing about you as a person. And I think it's a good thing if people know where you stand on certain things. I don't think it's inappropriate to talk about politics or philosophy or current events, controversial philosophical questions out there. What are you saying and why are you saying it and when are you saying it and how you're saying it? Those are very important things. The first thing that I always think about is, am I willing to lose my job, my career, whatever, over what I'm saying? Do I feel so compelled to say it that it doesn't matter what the consequences are? That's usually the first thing. And most of the time, I don't feel at risk for what I post. Sometimes I do. My filter was, am I willing to lose my career for it? And if I feel so compelled to say something and I'm willing to lose my career for it, then I say it. I write 10 things, I post 1 out of 10 things. I write for myself. I write to organize my thoughts.
Mm-hmm.
When I feel passionate about something, sometimes writing it forces you to kind of concretize your position to make sure that you're not thinking about it in a, let's say, an irrational way, and force yourself to think, is this true? When it comes to Israel, well, I'm Israeli, I was born in Israel. A lot of my family and friends are in Israel. So I feel very passionate about that topic. We look at Israel, investing in Israeli companies, not as a mandate, but there's just a lot of great companies coming out of Israel. It's affected people I know very directly. So truth is, on places like LinkedIn, people are, I think, a bit too scared to say that they support a genocidal terrorist organization. Thank God. I think most people just aren't going to go that far on a platform like that. So I really haven't seen too much divisiveness on that platform. It really hasn't impacted me in a negative way. I'm very careful not to try to say what the Israeli government or army should do, because I don't know. It'd be pretty ridiculous for me with no military experience, very little geopolitical understanding, to say what the right action should be of a foreign government. Again, I have stake in it. It's very important to me. But publicly, I never said what the army or government should do. I should say I have a very strong perspective on it that you can kind of read between the lines of what I think. Obviously, Israel has a right to defend itself, and Hamas should be obviously destroyed. The question is, what's the best way to do it? And I don't think I have a clue how to do it.
Yeah.
So I get very frustrated when I see people opining on it.
And when I follow your stuff, I can only see one side of it myself. From your side, what kind of reactions did you receive? And was there anything that particularly surprised you?
I was surprised that I didn't receive too much hate.
You thought you were going to receive more?
I think the people that tend to read my stuff are in the startup ecosystem. So let's say there are people that don't agree with me. They don't want to show that because I may not want to do business with them, which is not a poor assumption. I'll do business with people who disagree with me. My line is, when you support a genocidal terrorist organization bent on destroying the Jewish people, like that to me is like my red line. Like, I don't care if I lose my job or career over that. If someone says, hey, you shouldn't discriminate against people that want to kill you, I'm like, okay, well, it's kind of where I say I kind of should. Other than that, if you just disagree with the Israeli government, that doesn't bother me so much, because before this particular event, I'm a huge critic of the Israeli government because I have opinions and I don't always agree with what they do.
Mm-hmm.
Like I don't agree with the Canadian government or the U.S. government all the time. It's a government like any other, with all its flaws and nonsense, and it's a society with all its interesting quirks and traditions. Just like Canada, I tend to veer away from publicly criticizing even the Canadian government unless I'm very well versed in the topic. Why would I speak on it? So that's my filter. Am I the right person to speak on this topic? Should I talk about it? And if I'm going to talk about it, I need to learn about it pretty well so that I'm not saying something that's outright false or stupid.
And you mentioned something really interesting in terms of like, would I be able to lose my job over this? A former intern of mine has asked me this question. It was not about this war. It was about a different topic. She was like, well, I'm going to be looking for a different position soon, and I'm going to be still working on my career. It's, somebody who is up and coming and young. And let's say they do have enough to write about a certain topic, or it's about a personal experience, but very afraid to be public about it, very afraid to post things about it. And it was over that question. And so you being in a very different position now versus before, when everyone is working on their way up, what kind of advice would you give somebody in a younger position?
It's a great question. And there was a time where I didn't really have any profile online. Let's say 2 years ago, before I took over as managing director of Verstra, I had a lot of things to say, but I never posted about my opinions. Let's take someone that's junior And they're worried that if they take a position on something controversial, that it will impact their prospects. And the truth is, it probably will, because people look at that and they want to associate and do business with people that agree with them. It's a natural human thing to do. There's certain questions that go to your values and who you are as a person. But let's say just like a disagreement on something that's within the realm of acceptability, that shouldn't impact your job prospects. It does. I'm saying it shouldn't.
Mhm.
So what should this person do? Well, there are certain things that if you're so compelled to speak on, that not speaking will actually cause a negative impact on your own emotional state. I think you should speak. The problem is that most people that feel compelled to speak about something, they're doing it out of ego, doing it because they feel they have their voice has to be heard. And most of the time, they don't know what they're talking about, and they're doing it out of a place that's more negative than it is positive. They feel attacked by some opinion that exists out there, so they have to counteract it. I think that is probably like a bad motivation. A good motivation is that you feel so compelled that there's something not being said that you feel uniquely positioned to speak about, maybe in a particular demographic, maybe in a particular region, maybe about a topic that people don't speak about and you know about because you've experienced it and you're a part of it. I think those are all legitimate reasons to say something. And how you say it is very important as well. So people, I'm not saying that it shouldn't be hurtful to people, because if something's true and hurtful, then so be it. But not to make it intentionally so. There's just ways to say and do things. The posts that I would have made on the topic of Israel or a whole host of topics, I rewrite them like 5 to 10 times before I post it. The question is, what's the core message? And then take away everything else that kind of distract from that.
I also love the fact that you have many, many drafts and then choose which one to post. I never knew that. Because from, reading your post, I was like, wow, he writes a lot already, not knowing that this is like 10% of what you actually write.
I just want to say on the previous point is that why should someone post that, right? Why should someone say something if it can affect their career prospects? And this is more of a maybe a philosophical point. If you have to chip away at who you are, that the premise is you feel so compelled to speak about this that if you don't, it'll impact you negatively. Like you'll feel lesser because
Yeah.
you should have said something but you didn't.
Yeah.
That makes you a worse person. To turn yourself into a weaker person, that's not good. You should develop a little bit of courage and say things that you think is important to say. So that's the only reason I'm saying to someone to do it, because I think that not saying it is actually worse than saying it. It's okay to lose maybe 5 or 10% of your career prospects to be a courageous person, or 50% to not be a completely weak person.
Yeah.
Like there's a trade-off. The thing is I want to avoid is pretending like there's no trade-off to say nothing in certain circumstances. There is a trade-off.
Yeah, absolutely. And when you're young, it could all feel like it could be the end of the world because you don't know if it's going to be 10 or 20%. In your mind, it could be like 90%, and you just don't know.
Right.
And I completely understand where that person is coming from when they asked. It makes a lot of sense. I know that, due to a lot of controversy, there were a lot of people that were considering not going to certain events because public figures spoke out on things that were controversial, including Web Summit. And I was just wondering, did you feel that it was affecting decisions that affected the ecosystem? How did you see it play out in your mind or through your eyes?
The former CEO of Web Summit made some pretty stupid comments publicly. The only way to interpret them is that he supports terrorism against Jews. That's the way that I interpreted it. That's the way most people interpreted it. After being called out, doubled down several times before being forced to resign from a business that he started and probably owns a significant share of. I went to Web Summit because I already bought everything, and it wasn't right for the investors, right? It wouldn't have been right for me to take a stand when I've already spent their money. Had I known what he said in advance, I would not have bought the tickets. That would be my personal position. But I'll say that Web Summit wasn't a good event, just on its own merits. Maybe it's because a lot of people didn't attend. Google pulled out, and a couple of other big tech companies pulled out. A lot of the startups and speakers, not even non-Jews, like weren't just Israelis that pulled out of it, but just people that understood that the head of the organization made some pretty terrible comments, and it just wasn't a good event. But Collision this year was also a bit lackluster. Like, I don't want to denigrate the great startups that were there, but I've been there. I've been to Collision several times.
Yeah.
And this year it was just the worst. I think every investor I spoke with basically said the same thing. Just the event was not as good. And I don't know if it's something with the ecosystem broadly or if it's the organization in particular or combination, but it just wasn't a good event. So,
it was my first Web Summit, and you second what you're saying about that too. It was your first one too, right?
Web Summit, yeah.
Yeah. I was not at Collision this year, but it's good to know. So, in terms of going back to how you would see certain kinds of startups when you're seeing them for the first time, and all the startups that you met at these events, like Web Summit and Collision, as well as those that came to your office hour, what would you say are some red flags, green flags, let's call them yellow flags, that you immediately have when your brain kind of does sparks? I would say that's how I see it. It's my brain does sparks.
Yeah, there's a lot to say on that. I get it within the first couple of minutes. I get a pretty good sense of whether an entrepreneur is really baked in their industry, and if they've really thought through their product and their market, their competition. From there, kind of everything else. Like I don't go into a discussion with an entrepreneur with a preset list of questions. I do have certain things I need to understand about the business, but I kind of let the what the entrepreneur is saying dictate how I take the conversation, because I'm trying to figure out a couple of things when I meet someone, because the first conversation is not going to write a check after that, right? So you have to really address some core things in which I try to get a feel for to see if I'm going to spend more time on the business. When you speak to hundreds of companies a year, you can get a feel for this type of thing. I'll say some red flags to avoid is trying to not answer questions directly. If someone like in my position is asking you a question, it's for a very specific reason. Just answer the question directly, even if it's going to be a negative answer. What's your growth like? And then they talk about their projections for next year. We've invested in companies with not the best growth rates because we bought into the narrative and we believe the narrative in the entrepreneur. But I don't believe in the narrative in the entrepreneur if they're avoiding answering the question. The money's not getting into your bank account unless the question's answered. That's like a pretty common one, the one I just said. You want to be very transparent. You want to be very direct. You want to be prepared. Like you have to understand your numbers and your market and your competition. Don't say amateurish things like I don't have any competition or we're doing something that nobody else is doing. That just means either it's not a big market or you don't know your competition. I'm usually very impressed with people that have a deep understanding of their competition, and they're addressing the question from that understanding of saying, well, listen, they're doing it, this company is doing it this and this, and here's what we figured out about what they're doing that allows us to differentiate. There's other amateurish things, effort into your marketing, especially when you're dealing with get investment. You're trying to sell a story, right? Hey, you have no revenue or very little revenues and no profits, and you're going to burn cash for the next several years, and you're worth $30 million. You're not putting any effort into making that story believable. It's a bit of a red flag. And if the pitch deck is nice, I'm pretty sure your marketing material is not nice, and your pitch to customers isn't well thought out.
Any yellow flags?
I'll tell you a couple. When a company's been around for a long time and they change the name and they pretend like whatever happened before was a different business. Well, one of the yellow flags is how long business has been around, because you want to know. And again, we've invested in businesses that have been around for a long time. So it's not always an outright no. But the worst thing to do is to pretend like that thing that happened didn't exist when you just started this new business 3 years ago when you've been around for 8 years. Because again, eventually you're gonna find out. So that's more of a yellow flag. Most people are pretty upfront if you ask them, so that's good. But that's why it's a yellow flag. Because if you ask them, they'll answer it, but they're not upfront about it. They'll say we found it in 2019 when the truth is they were founded in 2015.
One thing that another VC has explained what their yellow flag is, and I would love to see if it's yours, is if I invest in you, and these are the different points that I would mark you off on, are these things that I can help you change once you get investment, yes or no? So would you kind of see that as a criteria of what is a yellow flag to you? Like, is it structured? Is it a legal structure problem? Is it a financial problem? Is it a customer targeting problem? Do you just not have the right channels for partnership or licensing or those kinds of things? Or do you just not have the? So what is it that you can help them with to kind of fill in the blanks in order to make it work?
I tend to believe that when we're investing, the company's figured out most things. We can help on the margins, right? Obviously, there's a lot of support investors can bring to the table. But the best companies we've invested in don't really need much of our help. There's many ways we actually do help with direct like business, bringing them clients and partners and whatever, which is great. But if the company needed me to help them with a go-to-market strategy, we often give them advice, but we're not investing in someone with no revenues typically. I can see maybe if you're like pre-seed investor, how that would make a lot of sense. You want to really guide someone and you're willing to give them a long rope, so to speak, to kind of figure things out. If someone just doesn't have some key things figured out, then generally we're not investing. Generally speaking, I want the entrepreneur to have most things figured out before we invest.
Just quickly to wrap up, would love to know what are your favorite entrepreneurs you would love to meet? Not in terms of who, but in terms of what kind of profile, and what were the ones that made you smile in this past year?
People I love to meet are people that are just passionate about what they do, but not passionate like, oh my gosh, I want to change the world kind of passion. That's go start an NGO. But people that like are just people that just want to build. They love what they do. They want to build. That they live and eat, breathe their business and their market, and they're passionate about delivering great products. Those kinds of people I'm very attracted to, and people that are leaders. I'll tell you something that's made me smile recently. I don't know if it's controversial, but there's one guy that's a reservist in the Israeli Air Force, and just an incredible entrepreneur, incredible person. I mean, this person has been put in life and death situations. You see that in the way he thinks about business. Like there's leaves nothing on the table. This guy is all in all the time.
Thank you, Matan, for being a part of this episode, and thank you for tuning in to Unlocking Venture Capital. See you next time.